This is the Shattering the Taboo podcast. Let's change the paradigm together with your hosts, Austin, Aesthetics, and Bebe Chez.
Why are men more at risk? I'll explain why that is from a evolutionary historical standpoint, why you need to take your mental health seriously. We'll talk about the nature of emotions and that they're not something abstract and the power that repressed emotions can have on your health. I'll give an example from a personal standpoint of my father and how that ended up affecting him health-wise. Typically, I see this happening when men reach the age of 40 and beyond. So if you're younger than 40 and you're living this degen lifestyle and you're grinding and you're exposed to a lot of technology, there are detrimental effects that are going silently within you, because a lot of the things that we do induce neurochemical changes that we don't notice, and it really has a toxic effect, a really traumatic effect if you don't learn how to release these sources of energy that are manifested in your body as chemistry. And then the other thing that I wanted to touch upon at some point, the third point would be how technology is making this worse. It's exacerbating this problem. Remember, men are more at risk and men engage more in this technology. Females probably more on the social media side than men would. Men may be more on the gaming, gambling side, engaging a lot more in other duties. But technology has a detrimental effect in making it worse. And we'll explain why that is, as well as how technology actually could help. Because the topic of today for the episode 3 of Shattering the Taboo podcast is the stigma that I see. And I've had conversations with a number of people from different cultures, and I see this a lot more prevalent often in other cultures, not so much maybe in the US. It depends also on your background, your upbringing. But in Asia, I see this very dominant. And one of the things that I think I'm seeing is a movement towards anonymity. So right now here, I don't see anybody. I don't see your face, except for Jaime. I am Austin. I guess I know Austin, but maybe if I didn't know his name was Austin, I wouldn't know who he is. So everybody here kind of has a certain level of anonymity. And this actually helps from a therapeutic standpoint because I don't need to worry about what people think about me. And you can see up top the Shattering the Taboo thumbnail. I don't need to worry about what people think about me, what I look like, my race, where I come from, my name, none of those. I could even get help in this new digital age that we're entering, and nobody really needs to know about it. I could get help from somebody across the globe. So access now to experts is closer to you than you think. Whereas before, I may recognize somebody as being an authority, and it'd be very difficult for me to get help from that particular person. Now it will become a lot more accessible. And I've in other spaces, I've discussed how my views on how the metaverse would play into this, even virtual reality, things that you can create that will allow us to get therapeutic benefits using technology. And if you're interested in that in the Q&A session, you can ask me again and we'll cover that. So let me hit upon a couple of important points, which are the nature of emotions. So we often think of experiences that we have as very subtle, as not being real, more abstract. Like if you guys close your eyes now and imagine an apple rotating above your head, you would imagine it to be just in your head. It's not really real. But if you were to be able to see more than what your nervous system allows you to see, because remember, your nervous system is a filter. It filters your experience. then you'd be able to see that thoughts and emotions actually have a more tangible effect. I'll give you an example. And I may have used this example in the past, or if you've been in a space where I've discussed it, maybe you've heard it. I was at a stoplight once. I was younger. And there was this person that was about to turn, make a left turn. Somebody ran their light and almost hit the car. And the person in the car got so upset, their vibrational state changed very quickly. They densified themselves. Their thoughts became really dense. And I saw very clearly how this kind of like mass that somebody else maybe was there, didn't see, this mass densified and came out of them and projected, and was like almost like a mass or a blob that just ended up getting projected towards that person. And so it was like an energetic form that was arising from the person and being projected to the other person, who was also receptive to this, because they were both kind of arguing and yelling at each other as this happened, which often happens, on the road. So the point here being that any experience that I have, any action that I take, first originates through me. I am the origin. I am that kind of rod that is vibrating and producing these forms that will be going out onto the world through my senses, through my voluntary nervous system as well, and I'm projecting out and onto the world. We, at the same time, receive the opposite, which is a lot of sensory stimuli, and we absorb it and we absorb it. And we may have had traumatic experiences. Our parents aren't perfect. They probably made mistakes, the school system, whatever it may be. There may be things that we don't like about each other. And so we carry all these experiences within us, and they are not abstract things. They're called in Sanskrit samskaras. They're tangible forms. They're like psychic scars, similar to a physical scar, but stored in the subconscious realm, in a realm that I don't pay attention to often. And this realm is manifested at the physical level as my autonomic nervous system. And there are programs operating in my autonomic nervous system that are secreting neurochemicals into my bloodstream. And they are the imprints of all of those things that I carry. So let me give you a personal example of how this can impact you and why your mental health is very important. Why we need to take into consideration the fact that we're not perfect in the present. We must go to the past so that we can actually really excel in these so-called ancient Eastern practices, such as meditation, mindfulness, etc., because I need to get myself into a whole state before I can tackle these more advanced practices. So my dad didn't take this into consideration. He had a really difficult life. And as Austin is going to explain shortly, the way that males were brought up before was very different than maybe they're brought in now. It may still be culturally biased, where some cultures may still do this. And my dad didn't really express his emotions well, and he really repressed a lot of his feelings and a lot of experiences. He really didn't go speak to anybody. He didn't get any type of therapy. He exercised, but he never really did any type of, maybe more Eastern practice. He developed an emotional type of high blood pressure that is common in males more than females because of this kind of repressing effect. Think of it as like trying to stuff a bottle, and you keep stuffing it and stuffing it, and then you put a cork on and it's about to burst. And so he dealt with high blood pressure, and it was the cause of him passing away, because when he was coming out of court one day, he got high blood pressure, he got a brain aneurysm, he had to have surgery, never made it back from surgery. And so what I want to caution you is that not just from a mental health standpoint, remember, mental health trickles into physical health. If you don't take time for your own wellness, you are doing a detriment to yourself, and it will catch up to you at some point in the future. And like I've said before, I've seen this with many people that I've worked with, both male and female, when they hit around the age of 40 and beyond, it will end up, you'll end up seeing the results of your actions over the course of decades. And so what I'm seeing is a very powerful movement. And my concern is that I'm seeing this male dominated environment, hustlers, grinders, super talented people that I absolutely admire, but they're doing a lot of detriment to themselves. And so that's why at the ZenApes, George was here. We had a discussion about this yesterday about how we need to implement this at a more global fashion, to expand it and open it to other communities that maybe aren't holders. And we're coming up with ways to do that, because it's really, I'm finding a sense of urgency here, because I want this space to dominate the world. I want the NFT space to really be the powerhouses that are healthy and can really push this into the future. And of course, all the wealth that we build, we can enjoy. So before I continue, and later on, I'm going to discuss what's known as the nature deficit syndrome. We'll talk about how men are more vulnerable, the relationship between technology, what things you can do to help yourself, and then we'll go into more details about that. But I'll see if anybody wants to chime in, and we can talk about the historical stuff with Austin, or let's let Jaime maybe chime in first, and then if anybody has questions, of course, please come up. And questions and comments is a conversation. Yeah, George, go ahead.
Yeah. Just wanted to quickly add that, yeah, you're right. Like people, like, people, young people, 30s, 20s, late teens, in this space, they all, a lot of them have a very strong grinding mindset. So you see this like constant glorification of working, 80 to 100-hour weeks or something like that, and stuff like, I like going to bed at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. every night, and like acting like that's normal, and that's like, somehow it's funny or something. And yeah, it's kind of funny, but in a sad way. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like those people, a lot of them will likely see those accumulated effects at around the age of 40, and they will see it very sharply. So yeah, I think there's a lot of preventative medicine we can do here.
Oh yeah, that's the action that we take. It's we're moving into an era of really anticipating. Remember, just because you think you feel okay does not mean that disease is not underlying. Disease manifests at a subtle level, undetectable to medicine until it manifests physically. Typically, we're getting better at diagnosing, identifying things a little bit earlier, but it's still nowhere where it needs to be. You need to be the one that really recognizes when you've pushed yourself too far. I understand. Like I'm working on a project, helping my business partner launch something. I know that when we're getting close to men and all that, it's going to go crazy. And I'm going to be pushing myself. But of course, you have to then some point get yourself back in order. I will be teaching at some point a workshop on how to do this, how to organize your life so that you're in sync with nature, you're in a harmonious state more easily. And more often than not, it is better to go to bed earlier, about around 10 p.m., and waking up around 4 rather than staying up till 4 and sleeping till 10. And I won't go into, if you want, I'll chime in a little bit later on, but it's not part of this topic, but we can discuss it later. But yes, it's very important for us to take this, seriously.
Yeah, man, great points. And it's unfortunate to hear what happened with your father, but I thank you for sharing that personal story with us. And I'm glad that you can share it so other people can learn and benefit from it and not have the same things happen to them. This one girl who was Egyptian, coming from that culture, who I used to be friends with, she had a father who was also a very hard, intense worker, and the doctor actually told him he needed heart surgery, but he denied the surgery because like they couldn't afford it. He didn't want to take time off from work. He was worried about his business, and he just denied the surgery and things just kept getting worse and worse. So like it's crazy because some people could still know like they're going to die or that they're in trouble and not even care because they think they have to do something for their family. They think they have to do something as a man and sometimes sacrifice themselves. So it's crazy, man. And this can stem back to the past. It can also come from modern socialization through the media and through observations like our parents, our friends, which also relates to the past because back in the day, men did have to be tough. Like some of these stereotypes about men that they need to be strong, they need to sort of repress their emotions, they need to push through pain, push through obstacles, toughen up, and just get shit done. It comes from somewhat of a truth in the past that is no longer as true as it once was because the environment has changed, the society has changed, the whole family dynamic and the role of a man has somewhat changed since these older times. We're no longer in an environment where we have to physically, literally fight each other for territory, for survival. You know, now it's different. A man has to go into the office, a man has to go to work. And it may be physical work, such as building things, engineering, but most of the time it's going to require different skills that you wouldn't have needed in the past, such as emotional intelligence, EQ, you know, people skills, customer service skills, having some sort of self awareness and emotional control. Because when you're working in a team, which all businesses, most jobs, you are working in a team and with other people, you need these things. You need to be in tune with yourself, your own mental health, so that you can be a genuine person and connect with these other people and be a better team player. Also, if you let yourself get burnt out, and you just hold these things inside when you have a problem. You don't tell your boss about it. You don't take that time off for that personal time. You just keep working through because you think it's what they want to see. You think your boss won't give you the time off, or it'll affect your chances of a raise, or your coworkers may think you're weak if you take some time off because they think you can't handle it or you're just not man enough. If you do that, it's going to end up hurting you in the long run. Yeah, you may look tough in the short term, but eventually that burnout's going to negatively affect your work. You won't be as productive. You won't be thinking as clearly. You may not be as nice, and it could cause friction between your coworkers and be detrimental to your relationships if you're in a bad mood and not handling people correctly. Also, if you're burnt out, your work just isn't going to be good. And these things are what you tried to avoid in the first place, but they're actually going to happen if you don't take that time off to focus on yourself, if you don't take the time or the initiative to speak to someone and get that help. So you have to do that. Otherwise, it's guaranteed to end in pain. But I think it's not really men's fault that they fall into this trap. I think that men are socialized, even this day, to be the tough, stereotypical, archetypical, old style of man. Like, you can just see it in our culture. Think of some common phrases like man up, toughen up, even how we were socialized as kids. Like, I remember getting hurt and my uncle like saw me fall off a bike, get my pants stuck in the chain and like ripped my pants off and I fell, hurt myself, like couldn't get my pants out the chain. And he's just like across the street, like watching me struggle, not helping me at all. And I'm like in pain, like trying to figure it out, get myself loose. And then my mom came and she's like, "Oh, what the hell? Why didn't you help him?" Like, poor kid. And my uncle's just like, "Kid got to learn himself. Like, the hell, he's a boy. He got to learn himself." You know, like sometimes we're raised where like men aren't supposed to get help. They got to just figure it out themselves. And if that happens to you as a kid, like you're going to just be trained subconsciously to act in that way. And you're going to fear seeking help because you're going to think it's wrong. You're going to think it's taboo when really it's not. Really, it's beneficial and what you should be doing. It's also portrayed in the movies and the media, you know, like you would never see guys talk about mental health in the media or anything like that until very recently. Like, I swear as a kid, I never heard the words anxiety. I never heard talk about depression on TV or anything, especially with men. But now in recent years, it's popping up a lot more. It's like, whoa, where did that come from? It's like these words were just invented, but no, they've always been a thing for many years. It's just as a kid, I'd never heard about them much because, like, it just wasn't talked about in the mainstream. It was all brushed to the side and somewhat taboo. But now with the, the technology and the farther research and things like psychology and fields like that, we realize that these mental things that people think are just a joke or not serious are actually, as Bebe explained with his father and whatnot, these things actually affect more than the mind. They're not just made up. It's not just like, oh, boo hoo, your feelings got hurt, go cry about it. Like, you'll feel better. It's just a feeling. It's not real. Like, no, it is real. It can physically affect your blood pressure, your mental health. It can make you age quicker. It can increase your heart rate, increase your stress, which increases chance of diseases, chance of heart disease, cardiovascular disease. It can definitely shorten your lifespan, lead to anxiety, panic attacks, depression, all these terrible things. And that's why it's important to understand yourself and get that help, because there's trained therapists now, there's experts, there's even people like me who are students of psychology, just graduated with a bachelor's degree and training to be therapists, who aren't yet licensed or experts, but we're still willing to help. If anyone in here is struggling, please feel free to hit me up anonymously or not, and we can talk about anything, because I have a lot of knowledge to share and I want to help people, especially men, with their mental health. And not only can these things benefit your health, they can also, if you're already healthy, they can take you to the next level. Like, understanding your mental health, understanding people, having a connection to your both feminine and masculine sides can actually make you a better man. It can actually make you more manly to take care of yourself and take care of your mental health. Because when you do that, you know who you are, you're more confident, you're more of your real self. And when you're more confident, when you're less crazy, less burnt out, like, women are going to see that. They'd rather take the confident guy who has his stuff together and can take care of himself, knows himself, is connected to himself, than the insecure, fake wannabe guy who just acts hard. Like, they can see through that fake stuff. You're really only hurting yourself. So I would argue that the real men are no longer the extremely tough brutes, but they're the men who can be tough when they need to, but who also have the balance into their feminine side, who can dip into a softer side and take care of themselves and relax a bit when they need to, seek help when they need to. I'd say that's the real man, that's the real alpha who has that balance. And when you have that, you're gonna be successful in life, especially in modern life. That's my take on it.
That's so true. Could I just quickly comment? Yeah, my dad was like that too. It's like, like like when I was like 1 or 2 or something, I'd fall over and maybe cry or something. I don't know, but he'd just be like, "Oh yeah, he's a boy. He'll figure it out." Like exactly like that. And my dad was like that extreme masculine type. Show no emotions, show no weakness, never seek help or anything. Like the very very extreme version of that. Probably being part of that. Old school Japanese culture probably had an effect on that as well. Yeah, I think you do wonder whether or not there's so much anxiety and depression and stuff like that nowadays, but you do wonder whether or not kind of like the tribal folk in like the Amazon rainforest or like the Maasai people in the plains of Africa, like how much anxiety do those people get like compared to us? I would hazard a guess and say not much for whatever reason that we could maybe go into later on. And also, yeah, I think that's a very good point. I think being in touch with, for a man to be in touch with their feminine side is something that's definitely worthwhile. So I'd love to hear more about that later on as well. We could elaborate more on that later on as well. But it's like, it's not about like being like, yeah, it's interesting and very nuanced. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely go more into the getting in tune with your feminine side from a psychological perspective. I could say a little bit about it real quick and then move on. So Carl Jung actually has a theory where men have an anima inside of their psyche, and this is just a term to categorize what one would call the female part of a psyche. So a man has an anima, which is his female part of the psyche. It's not his whole thing, it's just a part of it. And a female would have the animus, which is their male part of the psyche. So what happens is the anima is somewhat of a subconscious archetype that is universal to everyone's experience because all men can relate to it no matter what culture they come from. It's just part of being human. It may be somewhat biological. I'm sure the guys in here could relate. I'll try to explain what it is and like something we can relate to. So if you've ever seen a girl that you think is really cute, really sexy, you have a crush on her basically. Your perception of her is going to put her up on a pedestal. You're not going to see her flaws. You're not going to see her true being, how she really is. You're going to see her like through a Instagram filter or like a social media filter where you're just thinking about the things you like of her, and you're not even seeing the real thing. You're just thinking of her in your mind, building this image, and this image in your mind, it's not going to have any blemishes. It's not going to have any wrinkles or cracks that the real girl has. It's just going to have everything exaggerated, like a little bigger breast, maybe better skin. It's going to look ideal. It's going to look like a goddess. And that's your anima. It's sort of that thing inside of you that attracts you to the women, that makes you want them. It's sort of your connection to them, to the other sex. And this is what leads men onto adventure. This is what leads men to create and explore and conquer. Because if you think back in the day, to get a girl, to get a woman, it wasn't easy. It wasn't just Tinder. It wasn't social media. Men had to work extremely hard and travel and actually go outside to get these girls. And a lot of times they would have to take them by force from other men if you're going way back in the day. And sometimes men would just take the girl by force whether she wanted it or not, like back in the older cultures. So that kind of goes into the men's health stigma because like back in the day, to procreate and get a girl and actually achieve having sex to procreate your race and keep it going, which is like the main goal of evolution, what every man's main goal is, what they're wired to do biologically, you had to be tough. You had to be that type of tough older man. But as we said, things change now. You can get a girl different ways. It's not like barbarian type stuff. But anyways, when you have a healthy anima, you can see the girl for who she really is. You're not manipulated by a false image of like a false idol, a goddess, where you put her up on a pedestal and you worship her. But when you're not in tune with your female side and you're not really connected with your anima, it can take over you subconsciously and it can control you and manipulate you. This is how men become simps because they put the women on the pedestal. They're not connected to their anima, so they can't really see the woman as another human being. They can't relate to the woman as another human being and see themselves in that woman because they don't see any feminine part inside of themselves. They repress their anima. They don't see it inside of them, so they can't relate to the female because they see it as a different entity, a whole different being. And if they want the girl, they're horny for her, have a crush on her, whatever, they put her on this pedestal, think it's a goddess, and that's when men simp. That's when they get scared to talk to a girl. They don't have the confidence to talk to a girl. They think they're not good enough, where this girl is like a magical being with no flaws. Or it could go the other way, where the man only sees the girl as an object. He can't connect to her as a human. He can't hold a conversation. He can't feel that love or that deeper connection beyond just physical sex and using her as an object. This is where sex addictions can come into, weird fetishes can develop, porn addictions can happen. You know, people can not have a real relationship. Relationship issues can occur if you're not connected to your anima, because a man being connected to his anima and his inner feminine self, it'll allow him to relate to women and talk to them and connect to them as human beings. This gives him confidence to approach them and just be friendly with them because he no longer cares so much about whether they'll reject or accept them. You'll see them as yourself, as an equal. instead of a goddess, and it'll help you not be a simp if you can have this connection. Also, on the other hand, if you are like sex addicted and only see them as objects, if you can connect with the feminine part of yourself, then it could help heal that as well. So it's something very important. And if you have any more questions later on, we could go deeper into how to connect with the anima and more things,
Yeah.
but it gets very
I,
deep.
I think we need to have a separate spaces like later on, literally called something like Zen Apes slash connecting with feminine side, because this is so interesting. So I think in conclusion, we can say that some of those like what we call like extremely beta simpy males are actually the ones that also suppress their feminine side, whether they know it or not, which is very interesting. Yeah.
Well, if you look at
Yes,
you
yes.
know, the planet as a whole, that's what threw the planet off balance. For us to be in harmony, you need to have both the masculine and the feminine in harmony. And oftentimes, you know, men mistake this with being effeminate, but it's not really about that. It's really about taking the things, the qualities that females have that make them powerful, and expressing them, as well as the females should express the qualities that are manly, that consider more prominent in men, and express those as well, because it brings them kind of like into a wholeness. From a relationship standpoint, I can understand what Austin was mentioning, because I've been married for 15 years, and I know that oftentimes the way that I think about the relationship is always from a kind of male's point of view, like, oh, I don't need that, and why is she worried about that? Like, it helps you to really be more compassionate and connect with the female, the struggles, you know, that they may be going through. Um, the other thing is, let me describe a scenario here so you can understand why men are more vulnerable to the world that we live in now. We are less active than ever before as a society. Even if I say, oh, I go work out for an hour, it's not the movement, the level of activity that men are used to, a male is used to. So you can imagine that in the recent past, let's take maybe the last 2,000 years, men typically were foragers. They would go out, and little kids, what would they do? They'd learn from the dad. The dad would be like, okay, let's come with me. We're going to go hunting. We're going to go fishing. We're going to go foraging. We're going to do this or that. And there was a lot of active learning, a lot of movement, a lot of exercise, a lot of connection with nature. And one of the leading figures in the mental health space for young kids that actually is heavily involved with the Boy Scouts of America developed this idea that there was a deficit in society called the nature deficit syndrome. I call it nature deprived syndrome. But it's the same concept. It's that we sitting in a box, being very inactive in front of a screen, not receiving the right geometry, the right vibrations, is very unsoothing for the nervous system. It changes your chemistry over time. And this is why technology is so dangerous. I have said this many times, and I've discussed this with experts for over, probably, I've been talking about this for probably close to 15 years, if not more. The effect that technology, the rise that technology has had with the rise in attention deficit, hyperreactivity, which is more often seen in males, as well as autism spectrum disorders. I myself, having been an educator for many years, most of the autism spectrum that I've seen are mostly males. I see this more prevalent in males. And so and we can talk about why that is at some point if you're interested, why technology does this. But it is very important for males to do a couple things. So I was working with a client recently, privately. He has two NFT projects. So I do like personal kind of like life health coaching. You know, if I, you know, when I have the time. And this person was in his early 40s, was already developing the symptoms that I talked about earlier, was having a lot of physical and mental problems. And one of the things that he was doing, he was also having a lot of like back issues and other issues. So we sit there and we become very unconscious of our body and our breathing. And so I've done workshops, and I talked about before the power of the breath, which we're not going to do here. But one of the things that males must do it is imperative that you do this, is physical activity. Take breaks. Get up, stretch, do some twists, do some yoga asana, go for a walk. Whatever it may be, get your body moving. Whether it's getting a different desk where now you can stand, you can like lift it up so you can be standing for part of the time. It's another thing that I would say would be useful. I have a friend who's a psychiatrist, and in his office, he has one of those desks, and he has like a little treadmill. So he'll switch it around. Like the desk has like two sides. On one side is the treadmill, the other side is like a seat, and then he can turn the computer around, and he goes on the side of the treadmill, lifts the desk moves higher. So now he gets on the treadmill and he's walking while he's on the computer, maybe he's on a call. So you need to get your body moving. You need more contact with nature. It takes skill though, because depending on where you live and concentration, because for example, let's take for where I live. I have a really busy road near where I live. So when I go to the front of the house, I'm in like a classic kind of suburban neighborhood with trees and birds and whatever. But on the other side of the house is like a road and it's very busy. And so if I'm walking my dog or I'm just going for a casual walk, there's not enough nature to drown out the noise. And this is the problem that we've had. We've degraded nature to the point where the healing benefits of nature are much more difficult to absorb. And so I've been practicing the skill of being very mindful and concentrated when I'm outside and I just tune in to natural sounds. So let me give you an example. If it's nighttime, tune in. I don't know what you have, George, in Australia, but here we have crickets. In Puerto Rico, where I grew up, they had crickets. They had what are known as coquis, which are these little amphibian little frogs, little tiny frogs that make a sound that sounds like that, like coquí, and they only exist in Puerto Rico. And you have to understand that nature is high technology. It was designed for a specific purpose. Birds don't make a sound just because. They make sounds for certain communication, but those sounds as well are stimulating for you. The smells, the aromas that the plant releases that you're not aware of are stimulating to your nervous system as well. They're very healing. If you go outside at night and just focus on the crickets, they're emitting a vibration that helps tune your nervous system and can actually help you get in line. The shapes that nature produces do this as well. And so these are things that you want to keep in mind, that immediately, the problem is that most people just aren't aware. So they won't immediately act. They'll allow things to just build up and build up and build up. And it will get to the point where now they're in detriment. I wanted to also point out another thing that I think when Austin was talking, that triggered me, is the following thing. It doesn't matter what age you are. There's a difference between the kind of like the birthday age, that you were born in a certain year, and now you're 32, 45, 62. It's really about your real biological age. What have you done to your body? And what does that ticker really say? What are the measures saying? If I measure you internally, where are the deficits? What's wrong? How much trauma have you built up? Where are the pain? Where's the tension? Where are the things that have gone wrong? And so oftentimes I find people like this client that I work with privately, or the psychiatrist friend that I mentioned earlier, who also, when he reached his 40s, had a number of problems. They both have a body that is more like a 60-something-year-old. They're like much older than their age. You may be surprised to hear this, but in the era that we live in now, humans should live probably upwards to 200 years. But why don't they live that long? Because we have systems, social systems, financial systems, health, family, everything that we grow up in doesn't allow us to reach that maximum. It takes a lot of effort, but we can maximize that. We can make it so that we are 40 something, but we feel 10, 15, maybe even 20 years younger. we can, and I've seen this by studying masters, and I've described this if you've been in my spaces before, how I develop a system to teach people how to live more stress and disease free by studying those who had mastered this art. And so when I look at them, I've seen masters that in their 90s can pull their legs behind their head, and they don't leave their body, what you would call death. They don't leave it because their body is broken and they have to leave. They leave it consciously. It's called a maha samadhi. You consciously leave the body, which is very different. And so, what we want is to really cultivate a different way of being, a different way of you organizing your life so that you fit in you take care of yourself, so that you don't start building up the underlying killers of our generation, which are two fundamental pieces, which are stress and inflammation. One is tied to our habits, our way of thinking, our way of living, and the other one is tied more towards exercise, which is the inflammatory part, which I discussed a little bit yesterday in an event that we did for the ZenApes. Jaime, do you have any questions, comments? Anybody wants to come up?
Yeah, absolutely. You guys all have brought up some great points, and I think that's why it is so important, right? You're talking with people who are in their 40s and their bodies are more like their 60s, and they're feeling the problems, they're feeling the effects of the stress, and I guess keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak, and continuing to just be like this traditional man. And that's why it's important to discuss these things, because our emotions are tools that help us to rebalance. It oftentimes feels great to cry or to release that tension that's built up. If you're anxious or angry or sad, it's a healthy release of that built up energy. George, you talked about like your curiosity on the Hadza people, and how you think, or you wondered how much anxiety they experience. And I think that in my experience, I would say that they're probably a lot happier. They're not consumed with the attitude of excess that we are so engorged in here. Um, they work daily to meet their need, right? Their food and clothing, and they're content with that. And they work hard to do that. They get out in nature naturally. That's what they do. They go out and hunt and gather, and everybody's active, and they have that sense of companionship and camaraderie. Whereas here in the West, specifically America, but it's all over the westernized world, is like there's this sense of competition, and we lost this sense of community, which is super super important. Just historically, looking at successful people and how they've moved culturally, it's always been a community based thing. But now we have this sense of competition because our priorities are so skewed. Rather than looking after the affairs of all of us around us, right? Being a community, being friends, building each other up, we're tearing each other down in order to take advantage of a situation. We tend to believe and tend to pursue this idea that there's only a certain amount of things that are accessible to me at this very moment, and I must take advantage of that. But really, that's not the truth. The truth is abundance is all around us. It's overwhelming. It's a state of being, and we can all tap into it. And we get closer to that when we're working together, when we're loving one another, when we're building each other up, and when we're having discussions like this. I think this is the perfect example of what it means to be an alpha male or be a man, in general, because we're talking about ways that we can improve one another. We're not talking about, hey, what can you do to benefit me, or how can I take advantage of this situation? It's all about this sense of companionship, and it starts in the mind and prioritizing the things that are really important. that nature points to, that aligns with. And we see
Yeah,
that all the time.
yeah, for real. I mean, like going like talking about those tribesmen and those like native peoples that still live that ancient way of life like that. Like I look at them and I'm thinking, that's amazing. Just just it's like they're hiking in the forest or in nature, and they're picking berries and looking for like hunting stuff. They're together with their cousins and their brothers like all the time. There's really not much. There's much more camaraderie compared to modern Western society. And like nowadays, it's like the norm is sitting in front of a screen for 16 hours a day and being completely isolated, except for talking to your friends and Discord and and dare I say Twitter Spaces and stuff like that. So yeah, it's just such a completely, realistically speaking, a natural way of life, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it stems from that sense of competition. It stems from that the thinking that we are lacking in some things, not cultivating gratitude on a daily basis where our needs are met. Maybe there are some people here that your needs aren't met, and I feel for you and reach out if that's the case. But I think that we're all privileged and in a situation where we have an abundance, um, and we can work together to cultivate and garner abundance throughout the community. That's what we should be focused on. And
Yeah.
there was an example. I watched an interview of a man that went out and lived with the Hadza people, and they were joyful and laughing and joking with him because he was like they uh, delegated him to do the tasks with the women after his first day of hunting because they were so acclimated to running for miles, and he was getting scratched up by the thorns and thistles and the brush, and they were just running for hours on end, and they didn't need to drink water. They had adapted to it. They had this way of life, and they were laughing and having fun doing this. And he was like, "Whoa, I this is unbelievable." And he also made another example where they were making beautiful, wonderful art. And in his mind, he was thinking, "Hey, I could take this back to the West, and this could go in like a museum or something. Like this is priceless art." And they, when they were done drawing, when they were done coloring, they just let it fly away in the wind, because they were like, we don't have a need for this. This isn't a possession that we need. This is something that we had fun, we enjoy doing it in the moment, um, but trying to hold on to it is just holding us back. So that's a shift in mindset that we can have every day, uh, and improve. I think it's
Yeah,
just a
for real.
lesson.
Yeah, that kind of lifestyle is just like that to me is just like quite amazing, just being out all day with your family, extended family, like in those tribes, and just like hunting and looking and foraging for stuff and stuff like that, just in nature, like in the wild, just like that. And it's like going back to the competition thing, it's like a lot of people that I know have made millions, if not tens of millions, say from NFTs, for example. A lot of those people are like screwed in the head now for whatever reason, I don't know, but a lot of those people, like they're like even more mentally messed up than they were than before. So it's very interesting. It's like not even millions of dollars can make people happy even after all of this competition or whatever you want to call it.
Because it's been ingrained in us to consistently seek for more. Um, and and when you look at money, obviously it's a tool and it's real and it's tangible, but at the same time it's something that's fake. We give it value, uh, and to pursue it, there's if you're on a relentless pursuit of money, you can never have enough. So you may have like met this success or this goal that you put in your mind, 7 figures, 8 figures, 9 figures, whatever it may be. But as you reach those goals, you find out that all along you weren't pursuing the correct things. You weren't seeking balance in your life. You weren't seeking wealth or health and wealth and wisdom and love and companionship. You were seeking a digit on a screen. And that in turn leads you to be more hungry, more anxious, more um, pursuant of more, because that's what you're acclimated to.
Yeah, like you asked the question, George, earlier about tribal people, indigenous people, in terms of stress, anxiety. Again, the systems that are not in line with nature will produce these symptoms. So we have systems that promote disease, whether physical, mental, or even spiritual. And so we have to first fix the systems, starting with the financial system, which is a natural system. And we see that reflected when we look at how the financial system has damaged the environment and how that then subsequently impacts our health, whether physical or mental. Our system of law is not natural either. It was originally based on natural law because at least the forefathers here in the United States knew and were in communion with nature. They were more connected with nature, and they built systems that were in line with that. Free markets are in line with nature. We don't have a free market. Whoever thinks capitalism is free market is absolutely wrong. The other thing is that we put a lot. I mean, women do this as well. Both men and female will put so many things on the plate. The more you have, the more you have to worry about. So the more you possess, the more things you have to worry about taking care of, whether it's my portfolio, my NFTs, or my house, or my cars, or whatever it may be. It just builds so much burden, and it's so many things that burden the mind. And then as I'm thinking about all these duties and I'm trying to do more and more, I wear myself out. But one of the keys is, again, is building a schedule where you fit in, where you're putting in events in the day, little micro practices that we'll be teaching as we go through in other events, is teaching these micro practices that you can integrate in your day, waking up earlier, getting a better system in place where you go to bed earlier and wake up earlier. If you're going to be getting 6 hours of sleep, let's say, then why not get them in at a time window that is most beneficial to you? Most people don't get their 6 hours in a time window that is beneficial for themselves, and they wear themselves out. And I'll be doing a workshop just on that. And you'll see how really interesting this gets, because you could really design your life differently. Let's see, anybody who came up as a speaker, maybe Enzo or VK17, otherwise anybody who's not currently a speaker, if you don't have a question, you can drop back down. Anybody want to come up?
I could add something if no one has anything.
Yeah. I also just wanted to add a quick tidbit. You said something very poignant, Brian, when you said that, like, the more you have, the more you have to worry about. And Jesus taught, he said, beware of greed. Your life is not measured by how much you own, right? Your life is much more than that. So I think that's something that we should really, like, be aware of and keep in mind. That,
Well, you're
like,
breaking in and out a little. Your connection is a little bad.
yeah, just
No, he's clear. I think it's on your end maybe. It's
Oh, it
not
could be.
clear.
yeah, just that sense of greed. Any pursuit of wealth should be used in a way that improves the lives of those around us, rather than just to live a life of pure excess, you know. But I think we have a couple people that just came up. Hey, Scotland, how's it going, man?
I don't think he's like gonna actually say anything.
Okay,
Yeah, he's been.
I would
Yeah.
like to bring up another good point Bebe just talked about. You mentioned the systems and how we can create these systems to benefit our life. A lot of people, they always set goals. They're always setting goals, thinking about the future, but they never think about the system or the method that will allow them to achieve that goal. Now, that doesn't really make sense. Would it make sense for a football team to just look at the scoreboard the whole game? No, of course not. They're looking at the play sheet, the play calls. So, a quote that really stuck with me is, people do not rise to the heights of their goals. Instead, they fall to the levels of their systems they have in place. we will always be at the level of our systems in place. Think of it like a bucket, and you're trying to pour water and fill that bucket. If one part of that bucket isn't as high as the other parts, the water will just leak out of that part that's a little bit lower, and it'll never rise higher to the higher parts. It'll only go as high as that system is set. So we really need to focus on our systems more than our goals or even the progress being made. As long as we just focus on the systems, put them in place, we will achieve our goals eventually and we will be successful. And we could do another space or even a whole workshop. I'd love to get in a workshop with you, Bebe, if we talk about some topics like this, where we can talk about how to create systems for success and how to create a schedule that will benefit men and women in their life. Because the great thing about nowadays is we have so many ways to plan, so much technology and ways we can just create our own schedule, right? Outside of work, you pretty much can do whatever you want. And even some jobs are flexible where you can choose hours. So a lot of people mess up and they go and think about scheduling and they make it extremely hard on themselves. They think about, oh, I have to do this, I have to get that done. But it helps a lot if you look at it from a more fun perspective. Like, you can set up your schedule to be fun and to work with your personal preferences. It doesn't have to be hours and hours of work. You know, you could do something fun first and then do your work, or reward yourself after your work, or just divide your day up into whatever works best for you personally. If you're more of a morning person, you could get more of your work done then.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that was maybe part one of mental health stigma.
Yeah, let's run a part two.
Shattering the Taboo podcast, episode 3. Darren, sorry, but I have to wrap it up. So try to come back for the next one. We'll be announcing the next episode, and check for when we have it on Spotify. I'll be making announcements as well. Follow me, Jaime, Austin, the ZenApes, and love you all. Take care and have a good night. Peace out.
Yeah. See ya. Thank you for coming out, everyone. Have a good one.